If you want to spark interest, you gotta do something dramatic, and that's exactly what LG is doing with the G5. It has a new metal body and also that modular design, but the dual camera set in the back is also particularly interesting. Now, I've been checking out this pre-production unit for quite some time, and we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about that new camera system a little bit more. Dual cameras are nothing new. We've seen them before. Yes, they're unique, but still rarely employed. Now, the G5 follows after the V10, so it takes the dual cameras on the front, slaps them on the back. It also pretty much uses the same hardware that we saw in the G4 last year. So that includes a 16 megapixel main camera sensor, but it's now accompanied with a secondary 8 megapixel one. So in effect, that generates a 135-degree field of view, which is greater than our own eyes. So manufacturers had this mentality of having a more is better approach when it comes to cameras. So that usually related to the amount of megapixels they kept on cramming into its cameras for each successive device they push out. But the G5 doesn't really follow that. Instead, it relates to how much more the scene can be captured. Thanks to this new dual camera setup, the LG G5 is by default a panoramic expert, and that's the great thing about it, because normally when you're taking a panoramic shot, you gotta go very slowly and pan left or right or vice versa. But with the G5, it's simple and streamlined. You just point and shoot. That's about it. The great thing about it is that more of the scene is captured, and when we compare it to another camera, the Galaxy S7 for example, we can clearly see how the G5's new wide-angle camera is able to capture in more of the scene. And it's great for those shots when you want to have more friends included, or in the case of capturing, let's say, like a building, instead of having to move backwards or move farther away to capture more of the scene, you just stay in the same exact spot, and with dual camera setup, it gathers in more of that scene. However, there's just one conundrum with this wide-angle capture, and it's the fisheye-like distortion it produces. So basically, when you use the wide-angle capture of the LG G5, you tend to see this effect. Now, it's most prevalent around the edges, and it kind of reminds us of a perspective drawing in a way, just because around the edges, if you look at straight lines, they begin to slightly curve, giving it that fisheye distortion. It can be a little bit distracting, but this is just the unintended result with this type of capture. Of course, there are obvious situations and scenarios when the wide-angle capture is necessary and also handy. It's practical for many scenarios, for example, getting all your friends in that shot, but ultimately, it's going to be the consumers who will dictate whether or not it's useful. It's hard to say right now whether or not this is something that people will prefer finding in cameras going forward, but it's definitely a unique thing that we don't see in other phones.